good evening, and welcome to the final night of the Indiana University Writers Conference for 2008. It goes by quickly every year. It's hard to believe that we're already on Thursday night. I don't think I really have many announcements. Everything's gone pretty smoothly since you followed my orders for the previous announcements. Last night went very well. Thank you again to all of you who read. And I guess there's a few literary magazines left in the office, so please feel free to come by and get what's there. There is the sign-up sheet for contact information if you're interested in receiving ways to get in touch with your fellow conferees after the conference. And other than that, I don't think there's much except to make sure you remember to go to your workshop in the morning. Bob will say a few words of salute at the end of the night. I'll leave that to him. So our first reader, I am pleased to welcome Jean Valentine up to the podium to read for us. Jean, as you know, is the author of many books of poetry, most recently Little Boat from Wesleyan and Door in the Mountain, which won the National Book Award. Jean taught at Sarah Lawrence for, I think, 100 years, if I remember, from what she told me earlier in a conversation. And she's lived in New York for most of her recent life, which is something I admire, staying in one place. And I mean that seriously. I think she was also voted a national treasure by the Council of Nice People recently. My only connection to Jean before all of this is long before I even was interested in poetry. A friend of mine who had gone to Sarah Lawrence, once I began reading poems, she said, "Oh, well, you have to read Jean Valentine's poems because she's just such a wonderful person." And this person had never even taken a class with you, Jean, so your reputation was far and wide at Sarah Lawrence. But I just want to welcome you and to read us some poems. Thank you very much.
Hi, thank you. I wanna start by last night. I was talking to Romaine about the joys of trying to translate Russian poetry, and so I want to read you my effort at that, which was in the 70s. I worked with a Russian scholar and poet. On a poem by Osip Mandelstam. It's got no title. It's 394 is its number. And it's one of the last ones that we have from Mandelstam. It was dated the 4th of May, 1937, Voronezh, where he was in exile with his wife. Toward the empty earth, falling, one step faltering, some sweetness in this unwilling hesitance, she walks, keeping just ahead of her friends, the quick-footed girl, the young man 1 year younger. A shy freedom draws her, her hobbled step frees her, fires her, and it seems the shining riddle in her walk wants to hold her back. The riddle that this spring weather is for us the first mother, the mother of the grave, and this will keep on beginning forever. There are women, the damp earth's flesh and blood. Every step they take, a cry, a deep steel drum. It is their calling to accompany those who have died and to be there the first to greet the resurrected. To ask for their tenderness would be a trespass against them, but to go off, away from them, no one has the strength. Today is an angel, tomorrow worms and the grave, and the days after only lines in chalk. The step you took, no longer there to take. Flowers are deathless, heaven is round, and everything to be is only a promise. It feels to me like the mic's working, is it? Okay, good. I'm going to read poems from my most recent book called Little Boat, as Neil said. And I'm just going to read till I get to about 20 more minutes, and then I'm going to stop. Okay? So I hope you like it. This is called, the first one is where the title comes from. It's called La Chalupa, the boat. And I was sitting at a table with it was out in New Mexico. It had this Spanish and English alphabet. It was like those Loteria cards. And so it said La Chalupa, the boat. And then it had a little picture of a young woman poling a boat, and the boat was all painted with flowers. It was very pretty. And so I just started copying that. I am 20, drifting in La Chalupa, the blue boat painted with roses, white lilies. No, not drifting. I am poling my way into my life. It seems like another life. There were the walls of the mind. There were the cliffs of the mind. There were the 7 deaths and the 7 bread offerings. Still, there was still the little boat, the chalupa you built once, slowly, in the yard after school. This is called The Artist in Prison. I saw an article in the paper about this guy. He was holding up a 7-Eleven with a wooden gun, and he got put into prison for years. And it turned out he was an artist. And what he did, because it was the only materials he could get hold of, was he embroidered little tiny pictures like this big. And he got his needles, I guess, from the guards, but he got the thread. He would trade cigarettes for the other prisoners' socks and take the thread out. There's a whole story about him. Now he's out and married and has kids, and he's helping young people not get into prison. The Artist in Prison. His name is Ray Matterson. Became a famous so-called outsider artist. I will trade what? Cigarettes for their socks, for threads, to embroider little pictures for you, 2 inches by 2 inches. I will trade what? Whole days when I was free, red shadow on the inside of my skull, for socks, for threads. This I got a quotation from A Great Human Thing Was Being Accomplished. I read that the Dalai Lama's physician was in prison with the Chinese, under the Chinese, for 14 years, and he came out and he had no post-traumatic stress. And they asked him why. Western doctors were studying that kind of thing, and he said because in any situation, no matter how desperate or deprived, a great human thing is being accomplished. But your touch was everywhere, Lord, to be accomplished, though no one could see it. A great human thing was being accomplished. It drew every last part of him into you. The lost sailors diving for mines off Korea, every white hair, black hair, every invisible threshold, coarse and fine. This goes, Lord of the world. Lord of the world, soft Unconditional galaxies, look at me, look at me. Far away animal made out of dots up in the other sky. Woman, please you nurse my child. Please nurse my other child. Rub my hand discovered, caught in the prisoner's hand. Rub with your milk his hand. This goes, the door is fallen down. The door is fallen down to the house I used to try and pry open, in and out, painfully, stiff tears. I sit underneath the cottonwoods. Friends, what am I meant to be doing? Nothing. The door is fallen down inside my open body where all the worlds touch. This is called The 11th Brother. It's from a fairy tale by Hans Christian Andersen. It's called the Wild Swans, and it's where, you may have read it, it's where the 11 brothers and the 12th child is a sister. The brothers are all enchanted by somebody very, very wicked, and she's told that they're turned into wild swans, and she's told that if she can weave them shirts out of nettles by dawn and give them the shirts, then they'll be turned back into the young men they were. So the young men all get their shirts except the last one. She doesn't get to finish it. So, and that's for her favorite, the youngest, 11th brother. She gets one arm, but she doesn't get the other. So so when he turns back into a young man, he's still got a swan's wing. The 11th brother. The car you were driving flew off the bridge. It was drowning. This was after the wild swans. The story where even though you were her favorite, your sister couldn't finish weaving your shirt. So when you turned back to a man, one arm stayed a swan's wing. The car you were driving flew off the bridge. It was drowning. This was after the wild swans. Your sister had finished weaving your other arm. She dove down to give it to you through the gray water. You couldn't take it. You wouldn't. This goes all around the outside. All around the outside of the room I was given, they were lying uncovered in plastic rags, newspaper, rusted tin. Lying right up against the aluminum siding of the room I'd been given, as if it gave off warmth, the siding. I think I'm going to read you these hospital poems. I was out in Ohio about 4 years ago, and I had a little, very, very small little mini stroke. I wasn't sick at all, but they took me to the hospital because they were worried about it. And I stayed in this wonderful small Ohio hospital in Ravenna, Ohio, for about 4 or 5 days before they let me out. And I really recommend it. It was it was wonderful. You get a rest. I went out to something like this, and I had this little thing. I didn't even have to work. I just went to the hospital, and it was really not as much fun as I feel it was later, but it wasn't bad. And so I wrote the poems afterwards, but about that time, and they all start with the word hospital. Hospital, far from home. No time alone, sun, rain, can't talk, can't see out, can't even see to any depth down. What about youth? Its car. What about the bride's foot, cinnamon slipper? Now you, Ohio, your winter fields like covers over me. This is called Hospital at Last I Saw because it's got a quote from William Blake. This poem is hardly mine at all. It's got a quote from William Blake at the beginning of it. And then it's drawing on an essay that Fanny Howe wrote called The Fairies, or it's called Fairies. It's about the little people in Ireland, and she has a wonderful book of essays called The Wedding Dress. This essay's in there. So I have this quote by William Blake, and then I address the fairies. Hospital. At last I saw the broad leaf of a flower move, and underneath I saw a procession of creatures of the color and size of green and gray grasshoppers, bearing a body laid out on a rose leaf, which they buried with songs and then disappeared. It was a fairy funeral. That's Mr. Blake. Okay, I'm talking to the fairies now. Dearest, what were you doing there tonight, where they all understood everything they said? You came to make yourself a road through the house. A room, you said? Is it? It doesn't measure out. A poem? You cut it into pieces, slept under it. Time? You bore it on a green leaf under the ground. This one's called Hospital Strange Lights. This one, actually, I had a doctor's appointment. This is after I got back to New York, and this doctor asked me what I do. So I said, well, I write poems, I teach. And he said, I have a poem by heart. Would you like to hear it? And I said, yes. You know, he's a wonderful fellow. And I thought it would be something, he seemed to be about my age, and I thought it'd be something like Robert Frost that we had to memorize when we were in school, if we were in our generation. And it wasn't at all. It was the Song of Songs. And he had it in Hebrew, and he was memorizing it because he had to sing it in his synagogue the following Saturday. And I was so amazed that I forgot to ask him what part of the Song of Songs it was, so I have no idea. But when I got home, I just took a little phrase out of my own King James Bible, which goes, in the secret places of the stairs. So that comes in. Hospital, strange lights. I needed a friend, but I was in the other room. Not just the other room, another frame, dragging blue or brighter blue. Strange lights. The doctor singing from the Song of Songs in the secret places of the stairs. Us standing there in the past as we were in life. You turning and turning my coat buttons. This next one is Hospital. It was euphoria. That's something that happens if you have something that happens to you. I hope you don't know that, but the euphoria part of it was wonderful. I really liked that. It was euphoria. Little veins of it sent, burst to the brain, 3 little fireworks, white on the gray MRI. It was euphoria when you stove my boat and brought me over, listing in the racing foam. Then the last one of these is called Hospital Scraps. Scraps of hard feelings left on the floor, winter material. But out the window, sun on the snow, dressmaker's pins, somebody's soul, a feminine glint in the trees. So I think I'll read a few more from another sequence called A Bowl of Milk. Yeah, I read you 3 of these ones. This is an elegy sequence. The first one I'm going to read you is getting it. It got its title from Frank O'Hara, and the title is from a poem he wrote called "The Harbor Master," and the line is, "I wanted to be sure to reach you." Very beautiful poem of Frank O'Hara's, "The Harbor Master." I wanted to be sure to reach you, but to go away, and I wanted to be sure to reach you, and the charge still in us, ankle, waist, and wrist, and eyes not see you, or you to reach me, so with our townspeople at last we could rest. But to you now I offer, forgive me, river, what I could never then give over. This is called This Side. The grave window eyes across the street look in, eyes open, half open, or gone asleep. Madonna, Lord. I wait, antenna out at an angle, wrapped with aluminum foil, the radio turned this way or that, or the aerial snaps right off, and I carry it with me, caduceus. And I left a bowl of milk outside the threshold, the night the souls of the dead return, and in the morning licked it where he licked. This goes, I was lying there. I was lying there half alive in a wooden room at a Russian country place. You sat by me quietly. It's true you left sometimes, but came back, sat by me kindly, quietly. Woodsman, would you go back to the little light-wrapped trees and turn them on again? The hide of the deer shivered. The summer wind riffled through my hair. You are on a long, patient summer visit from death. I am forgiven, forgiving, to your place, the next to be born. I think that'll do it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Jean. As the director of the IU Writers Conference, I find myself in the absurdly privileged position of inviting writers to visit whose work has thrilled and delighted me for so long. And one of those people is Donald Antrim. He is the author of 3 novels, Elect Mr. Robinson for a Better World, The Verificationist, and what's the third one? 100 Brothers. Thank you for that, Christina. That's Christina's favorite. He's also the author of the beautiful memoir, The Afterlife. He lives in Brooklyn, but I don't know, apart from the exhaustion, I think Bloomington has been very good for him. So please help me welcome Donald Antrim.
Thank you. Bob, thank you for getting me out here. Use the word privilege, but I'm not much for opening remarks, but I have to say that this has been a privilege for me. This class that has been a fantastic group. Anyone who was at the readings downstairs last night will have a sense of what I mean and why. This has been a very, very lovely week, and so thank you to everyone, Bob, Neil, my fellow faculty, and the hostettes, because this has just been a really fantastic time. Before writing the memoir, I had begun the manuscript of what was to be a novel that began to touch memoir, and abandoned in favor of memoir. And so now maybe it's time to go back and look at this. And so these are the opening pages, and I've been doing that for a while, and these are the opening pages of an incomplete, unfinished manuscript, which I'm calling for now, Must I Now Read All of Wittgenstein? My father, whose work in radical orthopedics was for many years disparaged in the journals and professional letters devoted to shoe design for the congenitally disabled, was also, is also. And it may come as a surprise to followers of H.T. Antrim's theories concerning his first wife's, my mother's, psychosomatic clubfoot. The author of a brief yet quite readable study of T.S. Eliot's poetic development, from the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock to four quartets, with special attention paid to the influence on the young Eliot of the neglected English metaphysician F.H. Bradley, whose appearance and reality helped set the tone not only for a great amount of literary and artistic thinking in the early 20th century, but also, by way of Eliot, for my father's often intense relationships with people's feet. Let me point out that it is not my intention either to celebrate or, as some people might anticipate from a son, particularly from a willful and, you might say, that is, you might, if you're Paula, my estranged, alcoholic wife. Self-consciously obdurate firstborn like myself. Obdurate, Paula's word, italics hers, shouted throughout the house, night after night, loudly enough for neighbors to hear, were there any nearby, which of course there aren't unless you count old Mrs. Winston in her battered aluminum trailer parked at an odd angle behind the rocks in the woods across the field from the muddy pond at the bottom of the road. As I was saying, it is my intention neither to celebrate nor take issue with my father's psychophysiological and literary critical beliefs and practices. It is forever a man's task to orient himself in relation to his patriarchal legacy. And in fact, it must be said, and surely it has been said, that everything a man accomplishes in society or in solitude, in his work or in his bed at night at rest, is nothing more nor less than a kind of anguished expression of displeasure and mortification, an ejaculation of rage at the terrible enormity of the old man. Not all men will agree with me on this point, not immediately. But we are, after all, each and every one of us sons. And I believe that allowed time to consider our failed relationships with our fathers, we will realize the truth understood so clearly, as if through intuition or instinct, by wives, girlfriends, mistresses, older women acquaintances, all the important female intimates and sexual confidants, namely, that in the struggle to find, or as the case may be, produce ourselves as sovereign males, we must first bow down and surrender to dependency and humility. It is with this in mind as an act that will both delineate and dignify my origins, that I undertake the study of my father's work, and by extension from his work, his daily life. It is my hope that a careful examination of H.T. Antrim's writings will, in the course of placing this material within the broader framework of contemporary letters, afford me a measure of perspective regarding the old scholar himself, a perspective that I have not, up until now, I admit, been able to master. It is my further hope that I might, if I can achieve a dispassionate explication of Dad's manifold careers, as belletriste primarily, and secondarily as renegade, unlicensed crypto-medical practitioner, and more peripherally for a brief period during the middle years of my adolescence, roughly from when I was about 9 until shortly after my 13th birthday, as managing partner at a self-service lumber mill called You Saw It Here First. A business eventually brought into bankruptcy, as any reasonable person could have predicted, by an onslaught of personal injury lawsuits. It is my hope that in coming to understand through his scholarship my father's cardinal dilemmas in life, I might additionally come to terms with what Paula likes to call, for want of better terminology, problems in my own. Through this process, achieving a position from which reality is a little less subjective, and from which I will be able to make strongly supported statements regarding H.T. Antrim specific, and fatherhood, philosophy, and modernist poetry in general. And finally, in this way, affect what all sons must in their own lives and in their own good time affect if they are ever to establish themselves as men in the world, by which I mean I must, in knowing him and reading him and loving him, absolutely and unequivocally crush H.T. Antrim. Squash him like a little brown roach or a 1,000-legged water bug that goes skittering frantically across the carpet before being cornered against a chair or run to ground beside the trash can, then flattened from on high by one of my great black shoes, the shoe lowering slowly down to grind him into the carpet's antique weave and leave him there, a massive goo that will dry to ash and scatter on the autumn breeze blowing in the thrown-open window beside the enormous, masculine, hand-rubbed mahogany desk on which T.S. Eliot's concept of language lies open and waiting at page 1. Page 1. In a minute. Before embarking on the book's opening, I mean my father's book, not mine, I believe, got very nicely underway on mine. Before setting out on this deeply personal, albeit mainly symbolically significant project, the son's criticism of the father's critical assessment of eminent critics, it will be useful to say a word or two about the genesis, composition, and publication of T.S. Eliot's concept of language, with the understanding that more on matters relating to creation and invention and to H.T. Antrim's writerly discipline and or wild lack thereof will, I hope, follow. T.S. Eliot's concept of language was completed and published in 1971, the same year my father designed and built, downstairs at the wobbly carpenter's table in our dimly lit, perpetually flooded basement, his first, and some might argue, his most elegant. Though far from his most effective, these were stacked-heeled, five-eyelet lace-up balmorals featuring shapely, narrow toes and sloping vamps, all done up in imported black calf. Corrective shoes for my mother to wear around the house and while running errands in town. The shoes, and it may come as news to readers already familiar with his poetical investigations, though as yet unacquainted with H.T. Antrim's orthopedics, were designed to make their wearers stop drinking. Would it be in bad taste, I wonder, to wish that I had, I should say, a pair of these shoes to give Paula? Such a wish represents a good instance of what my friend Robert at the Animal Clinic would call a retrospective reparation fantasy, the sort of obsessional invention that can rule a person's mind for weeks or months at a time. Better, in my experience, to concentrate on hard reality and the crucial material at hand. I am referring to the catalog of flaws and deceptions that can be found in my father's otherwise unassailable critique of T.S. Eliot's Poetics. In order to properly commence this study of my father's intellectual work, the work done by him during the years when I was a boy, I must forget about Paula. I must drive Paula from my mind. there. She's gone. No, she's not. Here she comes, barging into my thoughts, castigating me for not loving her enough. I can hear her voice. I can see Paula standing, as she always stood when hurt or angry over some long, drawn-out problem between us, hands on hips to the doorway, in the doorway to my father's, excuse me, my second-floor study. Leave me alone, Paula. I'm working, I insist out loud whenever I hear her voice in my head. On the other hand, I don't hear her voice, not yet, because she is treating me to a nice, big helping of silence. This is one of Paula's techniques for making me feel powerless and alone. She stands, leans rather, wearing her blue miniskirt and one of those clean, white, tucked-in Parisian-style blouses we used to get her on weekend museum and shopping trips to Washington, D.C. In my mind, the shirt's cuffs are unbuttoned, with sleeves rolled partway up her arms. I see Paula leaning and therefore slightly bent at the hips, resting her body against the wall, feet planted in the doorway. Paula leaning like a willow blown in the wind in the doorway, with the door flung open and the upstairs hall revealed in afternoon light around her hips and shoulders tipped against the interior of the doorway. One raised arm is bent at the elbow pinned by her body against the door's interior frame. And her hand is opening and floating in midair with its wedding ring showing on her ring finger, or maybe the wedding ring is not showing. It's her other hand waving in the air. Her bare feet are placed exactly in the doorway, heels planted outside on the wide planks that run the length of the upstairs hall, toes pointing inside the second-floor study. Paula's feet are positioned, it seems to me, as I picture it, almost strategically, as if she is planning a quick getaway. That's just like her, or maybe it's just like me, neither in nor out. And Paula is glaring and biting her lower lip in a way that I learned over time to both love and hate. Love and hate. And of course she is fuming. What? There's no point shouting at people who are not in the room. What am I supposed to do? I still want her. Even for an hour. Drunk or sober. Crazy or sane. I don't care. So long as I can slide out of this chair and crawl across the floor and kneel before her and raise her skirt and pull her panties down around her legs and put my face. As my veterinarian friend has reminded me, again and again, Little Chief, that's his name for me. If you indulge these fantasies, you will lose your ability to think. Where was I? Of course, my father's published literary theories. It is difficult to say, looking back over the years when H.T. Antrim was deep in his ruminations on Eliot and the long-forgotten philosophers, whether he might have anticipated that his work would in turn, decades later, become material for his son in search of ideas regarding the interrelatedness of English and American poetry, women's shoes, the lumber business, and certain vague traditions surrounding genteel Southern fatherhood. What I'm trying to say, in a roundabout way, is this. Dad, if you're out there anywhere, and you happen to read this, and you don't like it, well, I'm sorry. But you've got only yourself to blame, because you knew that though I was a young boy and unable at the time to understand you one bit, I was nonetheless there. I was in that house. It was you, me, and Mom, and occasionally some other people who came to parties and wouldn't leave. And also my ailing sister. We can't ever forget Emily. And after all, and as you must have known, I was paying attention to everything. And you knew that one day I would grow up. And you must have realized, too, that once I grew up, and in order to grow up, to really grow up and be a man who can stop acting like a depressed 13-year-old and generally running away from, for want of a better word, love, I would have no choice except to do exactly as I'm now doing. And I am sorry if you don't enjoy this, Dad, but you knew damn well that I was going to come after you. You knew because you raised me. You knew I was going to work on your work.
You knew, and you went ahead and published anyway. Page 1. There are indeed things that cannot be put into words. So begins, in these words borrowed from Ludwig Wittgenstein. Paraphrased by my father, note to self. Search bookshelves for Tractatus and check against original. So begins, as I was saying, the introduction to T.S. Eliot's concept of language. My father's book, a collection of words, words about the things that cannot be put into words. What does one to say about an opening like this? Is it ironic? My father says, with his next sentences, and still quoting Wittgenstein, referring in his Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus to the things inexpressible in language, they make themselves manifest. They are what is mystical. More on mysticism. Wittgenstein's, Eliot's, and my father's later. Before proceeding, I have to ask myself an embarrassing to ask question. Must I now read all of Wittgenstein? Must I explore and digest each of the books my father read during the composition of T.S. Eliot's concept of language? Must I make it my life's work to emulate Dad's life, his work? Must I read everything my father read? The answer could be found in the opening paragraph of T.S. Eliot's concept of language. My father states quite reasonably, it is not likely that T.S. Eliot ever read the final proposition of Ludwig Wittgenstein's Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus, but it is evident, I think, that the notion it expresses is pertinent to the position Eliot himself came to articulate late in his career. When he says in the quartets that the poetry does not matter, he is stating the same understanding about the relationship between word and act, between word and expectation, and between word and reality that Wittgenstein, from another position, settles upon. For the philosopher, such a conclusion presents certain problems, but they did not necessarily undermine his habit of philosophizing. Nor should my all too incomplete knowledge of my father's intellectual qualifications undermine my habit of understanding, then failing to understand, then working out again the relations between son and father, between our words and acts, between our words and expectations, between our words and reality. The house that we lived in, and that I live in today, sits at the highest elevation of a barren ridge, with trees around all sawed to stumps by Dad during his heyday of chopping, sawing, and splitting whatever wood he could get his hands on. At midnight, with the house's lights out, the property takes on a look of haunted decrepitude that is not uncommon to great houses in this realm of the dilapidated, semi-agrarian, patrician Old South. Round these parts, the Civil War was lost and never lost. Washington lies half a day in the car away, and along the trip, looking out the window to the left, the Blue Ridge Mountains are visible as a row of purple hills. Farmers grow corn, tomatoes, squash, and beans, and fields left unplanted are squared off with fences painted white. Town itself is scattered across 3 broad hills, the middle of which is Lewis Mountain. Lewis Mountain is not a real mountain. The town is made up mainly of gas stations and feed and grain wholesalers. There is a drive-through branch of the regional bank, and on Cherry Street we have a number of antique stores selling mostly junk. The good stuff invariably goes to estate auctioneers who travel from as far away as Richmond. And a hardware store, a liquor store, a place to have coffee, and Ruffert's, a ladies' clothing store that has been in business for 60 years. Not far from Ruffert's are funeral homes, Woodbury and Sons for the Presbyterians, Moffat's for the Baptists. We have a cardiologist with an office in town, and on a tree-lined street featuring some of Lewis Mountain's older homes, you'll find my friend Robert's veterinary clinic. In recent years, painted signs have begun to appear above porches and in yards, advertising psychotherapy, chiropractic, and tax preparation. We've got the Lions, the Elks, and the Rotarians, and down on Main Street are our Chamber of Commerce, an ice cream parlor, the public library, and a smelly community center swimming pool that is used, as I suppose is the way with public pools in small towns everywhere, as a meeting place where teenagers congregate to smoke marijuana and have sex. Where was I? Heading south on Main Street toward Eugene Carter Road and the turnoff to my house, you'll pass the municipal high school. The high school sports teams are the Battle Ponies. You saw it here first, was housed in an aluminum shed since ripped down at the intersection of Old Highway 7 and Eugene Carter Road. Eugene Carter Road will take you to Eugene Carter College, a Bible academy affiliated with the Southern Baptists. A good deal of my loneliness in life can be attributed to the fact that I live where I do without going to church. I should say on a last note that there is no hotel here. Because town is small, its lights after dark are insubstantial, and the stars on clear nights can always be seen. Nights atop this wind-blown bluff do get cold in the winter months. The house in the old days, I refer to the time when my family was intact, my old days, as opposed to, say, the years immediately following the war between the states, was heated by fireplaces and a solitary wood stove. The stove, pretty much an anomaly this far south of New England, but we were the sort of family who would make it a point to have a cast iron wood stove placed squarely in the middle of the kitchen, mounted on loose bricks laid square to make a pedestal, and with its exhaust flue like a dragon's neck snaking up through a hole roughly gouged in the ceiling. When I was a boy alone at night in my bed, so much the same in those long ago years as in these months since Paula has moved out, alone again in my old twin bed in the little room at the top of the back stairs. I anxiously imagined that our household dragon, perched on clawed feet, had reared up and burst unrestrained through the plaster, was peering around upstairs for children to eat. Downstairs in the kitchen, water in a corroding pot evaporated from the stove top. This took dryness out of the air and helped my sister, who had trouble breathing. Emily was 3 years younger than I, precocious and extremely frail. She lived in a room down the hall, in a bed piled high with stuffed animals. You could get a running start, pounding up the stairs, sprinting past my room, zigzagging sharply left through the open door, dodging around the portable oxygen tank, piggybacked in its wheeled trolley, and dive headlong into bears and ponies. This made Emily scream. I'm thinking about the years when she and I were 6 and 9, 7 and 10, 8 and 11. The years when our father was making important headway in his work on T.S. Eliot, and the poetic record of his, Eliot's, early philosophical disenchantment with language as a medium for meaningful communication. Emily screamed, as I was saying. Sometimes her air tube fell out of her nose. Bent at the waist, doubled over atop layers of blankets, she coughed. I sat beside her on the bed, never knowing how to help, feeling in these situations guilty and exasperated over what? Hurting my sister? I would tell myself, only wanting to have fun. But we did not, Emily and I, play together in the usual ways that brothers and sisters do. We did not share secrets, or play tricks on each other, or put on puppet shows for our parents, or make plans to run away from home together, or build clubhouses in the yard. On the other hand, there was one truly calamitous puppet show. And I did make at least one plan to run away, a plan that I must have confided to Emily. And now that I think of it, we once constructed a fort using porch furniture draped with bath towels and bed linens taken from the closet at the top of the stairs. I will say more later, provided this material obtains in relation to H.T. Antrim's contemporaneous intellectual preoccupations, his answers to Eliot's suppositions in the four quartets that every poem is an epitaph, and the fire and the rose are one. Concerning that fort, and a not very nice trick I played on my sister. For now, I should say that Emily and I were friends from time to time, though even in our moments of horseplay, of diving into the animals, we failed to become allies. And yet I am certain of her love for me and of mine for her. Perhaps it would help. I'd be better able to report on the time spent with Emily, her final days, the games we played or didn't play, if those memories did not unfailingly lead me to Paula. You be the bear with the messy hair. I'll be the duck who wants to fuck, Paula would announce to me on a good night when not too much Kentucky bourbon had been drunk and the house was quiet and we were beneath the covers. She said, "Quack." I was always so embarrassed to be doing this. As I suppose was she. But it got us going. It got sex going. Grr. Quack. Grr. Quack. Grr. Quack. We were getting started. It took us a while to warm up. The lights in our room, the big second floor bedroom with the fireplace in it, the room that had been my parents', could be left on or turned off. And by bedside lamplight, or by the silver light from outside the windows, from the stars, on cloudless nights when the moon shone brightly, the moon, or during wintertime, by the light of a fire that cast our shadows onto the wall, flickering in enlarged projections, we watched like shadow plays of ourselves with the sheets thrown off. Our silhouetted shapes moving erratically on the wall to sounds of quacking and inarticulate growling. By these lights, I could see Paula's neck and face and her hair falling across her eyes, settling across her ears that stick out slightly, and her lips and her teeth, and her freckled shoulders marked in summer with tan lines, and her belly below her ribs, and Jesus, I should think about other things besides Paula lying back with her legs raced off the mattress, her feet in the air beside my head. Grr. Quack. Grr. Grr. Quack. Quack. Grr. Quack. Grr. Quack. 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 We were together. She was below me, and we were kissing. Her taste to me is ineffable, neither salty nor sweet, making me want to lick her like a bear licking honey. I daydream about Paula's body beneath mine on my parents' old bed, and I remember Emily with her knees pulled up to her chest in bed in her room with ducks and wild ponies. Page 1. I mean page 2. What I wouldn't give right now to throw Paula's legs back over my arms, lift up her ass, and fuck her like a duck. Eliot, by denying the disappearance of God, discovers that language could be used to bridge the void and then to reaffirm the validity of a metaphysic. But the movement from the irony and self-isolation of a proof rock to an affirmation of the reality of an incarnate absolute has not yet been fully explored. That's my dad. Are you with me, Dad? Are you out there? Can you hear me? I'm awfully anxious about this project of yours. What I'm trying to say is that I'm not sure if I think this is a good way for me to be spending my time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Donald. Thank you, Gene. Please join me in thanking again Kevin Proofer, Tony Ardizzoni, Karen Fowler, Anne Marie Oman, Ross Gay, and Allison Umminger. Thank you. I can't imagine being flood stranded with a better group. I want to thank all of you for what an amazing week. I've been in these rooms that have just been crackling with energy and with creativity and with love and with intelligence, and I can't believe it's over. We'll be having a what do you call it? A hug circle over here. The wine will be here, and the Indiana Review, the one Ross talked about the night of his reading, is also here. The editors have brought it along, so you can buy that. Thank you so much. Good night.